What's up YouTube? This is John Helm with Helm Wood Shop and Smithy, back with another knife making video. Last time y'all watched me forge out this blade that was intended to be a Kiritsuke, but because of some cracks that developed during the forging, I had to change the profile of it a bit. So now I'm left without a plan on how to move forward with this knife, so I need to go back to the drawing board and figure out exactly what I can make from this. This is a quick drawing that I did just to show y'all what a traditional Kiritsuke knife looks like. And then this is kind of what I decided I'm going to wind up with. You can see that it has a lot of the traditional elements of the Kiritsuke, but it's sort of a modernized version of it. So the first thing I notice when I look at this is that it has way too much curve to it. I need to straighten this out a little bit. It also doesn't have quite as pronounced of a step right here as I would like for it to have. So I'm going to have to figure out a way to basically forge all of this steel down just a little bit. I'm hoping that I can get a majority of that done when I just forge this so that the cutting edge is straight, but there'll probably be a little bit more. I think I'm going to clamp it in a leg vise and forge down on it with a piece of wood. If that doesn't work, I'll probably try to do it over the step on the anvil. I'll just have to tinker with it until I get it the shape that I need it to be. I also have a fairly thick edge on it right now, so I'll probably take down the edge of the bevel a little bit and try to get some more width on the blade, and then forge this down so it's smooth. And last but not least, I will have to forge this back a little bit. I don't want the fingers to stick out in front of the blade because when you come down on a cutting board, you don't want to wrap your knuckles on it. And this is a little bit too curved right now. But before I go off and light the forge, there's a problem in the shop that I need to deal with. If you remember from my Bowie knife series, I had to replace these wheels on the flat platen, and so these are brand new wheels, and you can see just how worn out this wheel is. You see how slanted it is? It's wearing a lot more on the left side of the wheel than it is the right, and that is not an issue on the bottom wheel here. It is still nice and flat. Also, the crown on this tracking wheel is coming off really, really quickly. This is also a brand new wheel. So these are issues I shouldn't be having at all, and I'm not exactly sure what is causing them, but I need to get it worked out before I can grind this knife. If you look down at the top of the platen, you can see that it is wearing on the left side a lot faster than it is on the right as well. So I think that a wheel somewhere on this is out of alignment, and that's causing it to run at an angle to where it's putting more pressure on one side than the other. So the first thing I'm going to do is check all the alignment on these wheels and make sure that everything is nice and straight. This is an Ameribrade grinder, and when you get one, they give you this gauge of sorts that should sit flat on here, and it should sit flat up against the frame. I don't think I'm going to get it any better than that. That's really straight. Okay, so how else would this be happening? I'm gonna have to put on my thinking cap, man. I'm lost. This platen wheel is the only one that is wearing unevenly, so it has to be an issue with how it's attached. It has to be on there crooked somehow. So I'm gonna take this off. I happen to have a spare platen wheel, so I'll attach that one and make sure that it's perfectly square in all directions, and hopefully that'll fix the problem. Just to make sure that everything is square, I'm going to take a yardstick and hold it up against the sides of the two wheels, and then use a right angle to make sure that they are in line with one another. I think we have found our problem. Alright, I finally tracked down what the issue is. This wheel is too far this way. It needs to be about a 1/16 of an inch in this direction so that it lines up nice and even with the tracking wheel. Either the assembly is somehow off canter, or I need to have another washer in between this and the platen assembly. So I'm going to tinker around and see if I can't fix it by adjusting these bolts that attach the platen assembly to the tooling arm, and if that doesn't work, I'll have to make a washer to fit in there. So how I wound up doing this is when I took off the tracking wheel, there were 2 washers behind the bearing, and when I took off the platen wheel there was only 1. So I just took one of the washers from up here and put it behind this one, and that way it kind of closed up that gap a little bit. But when I was measuring it afterwards, I noticed another issue. When you adjust the tracking on this, it doesn't only change in this orientation like it's supposed to, it actually changes in this orientation, and it is not supposed to do that. So there's only 1 bolt that would control that from moving, and I'm going to take it out, clean it off, lube it up, and tighten it down nice and tight. Alright, let's toss the belt on it and see how she runs. You know, I think my belt tension might be a little bit too high. Let's try bringing that down just a smidge. Yes, that actually feels significantly better. Well, it's definitely a lot quieter than it was, which means that there's less friction, and less friction is always a good thing. I'm not sure if I completely fixed the issue that was causing the wheels to wear down faster. I guess the only real way to know is to use it for a few months and see how it goes. Either way, I'm back in business. Let's get to forging. First order of business, try to straighten this edge out a bit. Alright, now I'll try to move this end portion forward just a hair. I'll squeeze it real tight in the vise. And then whacking it on the back of the stick of wood. During the second normalization cycle, while it was cooling, it developed a warp. And what I personally do is I continuously normalize until I get 3 consecutive normalization cycles where there is no warp. Now in most blades I only wind up doing 3 because it doesn't warp while it's normalizing, but if it does, I just assume that there are stresses in the metal that need to be alleviated before I quench. So that's what I do. I don't know if there's any science behind that or if that is even the recommended method, but it's what I do and it's been working well for me, so I'm gonna keep doing it. Time for the quench. And it is very hard. It's the next day, this blade has been tempered, so it's time to draw some lines and grind the profile. One thing that really sucks about working with leaf springs is that they're curved, and they've been curved for a long time and they like it that way. So sometimes even though you forge it out flat, that curve will start to show up later in the process. And that is exactly what has just happened on this blade. Of course, it was straight after I forged it, but then after I quenched it, there was just a little wiggle of a warp here towards the tip. Nothing too bad, so I just clamped it to a piece of angle iron, stuck it in the oven for the tempering cycles, and after the second tempering cycle I let it sit while clamped to the angle iron until morning. Then I took it off the next day, and it was straight as an arrow, just like I planned. But then today I started grinding on it, and I couldn't get it straight. It seems like I was always grinding on the ends more than I was in the middle, so then I take a look at the spine, and it has started warping during the grinding process. I don't even know how that's possible, but it's happening. So I'm gonna wrap up the edge of this in a wet rag, heat up the spine, and try to bend it straight in the vise. I'm not gonna be gentle with it. It's either gonna get straightened out real fast, real easily, or I'm just gonna make a new knife because this thing has already had some issues. And some of them are potentially issues that I don't necessarily wanna pass on to a finished knife. This thing did have a lot of cracks in it, and it's gonna be a brute to forge finish, so there's a lot of this blade I'm not really gonna be able to properly inspect for cracks. There could still be some present. I don't see any here, but unless I can get this down to about a 220 grit finish, I'm never really gonna know for sure. So let's go over to the vise and see if this thing wants to act right, and if it doesn't, I'll make one that does. And I won't make it out of leaf spring this time. I was able to correct a majority of the warp in this area of the blade. This tip though, I would get it straight, and then as it cools, it would just curve back over. This tip isn't gonna go anywhere. This knife is gonna have to become a lot shorter. I'm gonna need to cut it off right about there, which kind of sucks. It was cool as a really long knife, but I think this will still be quite long enough. You know, one thing I can say for this knife is that the heat treat on it is superb. When I was trying to straighten it, I was really putting some stank on it, and I was getting quite a bend in it, even here at the base where it's a rather thick blade. It's probably just shy of a 1/4 inch. And if I had gotten it too hot and I had a large grain structure, yeah, I feel like it probably would have snapped with the amount of pressure I was putting on it. So, at least we know that we're gonna have a good, tough knife with a nice cutting edge on it. Anyway, back to the grinder. So the same damn thing just happened to me again. I got it nice and straight in the vise, started grinding in the bevels, and it just gradually set that warp back in. Since the metal is cool at this point, I'm not exactly sure how it's happening. And basically this is gonna wind up being about that long if I just cut off the section that is warping really badly. It is too thin for me to heat treat again. And even if I were to do that, there's no guarantee that I wouldn't just wind up with this exact same issue. So what I'm gonna do is get a new piece of steel that is not a leaf spring, and I'm gonna forge it from that. But I will be doing that next time, so thank y'all very much for watching. Sorry about screwing everything up. And if you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell so you can see when I come out with new videos in the future. And until next time, y'all have a good one.